Hello and welcome back inside the Park for May for podcast number 909. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camber. You know what we do on race weekends.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. And tonight we're going to do that. We're going to talk about the U.S. Grand Prix in Aston. The circuit of the Americas, a fantastic circuit. Before doing that, though, I thought it might be handy for me to go out and find my co-host, who is an actual professional driver, the sporting manager of the Aston Martin Heart of Racing team, which I happen to know had some pretty exciting news this week. So we're going to talk about that. You know who it is.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul!
Yeah.
Oh, man, 4 points. And I know that hurts, missing the championship by 4 points.
Yeah.
That hurts.
It does. I haven't even been able to make a post about it, quite honestly. I'm sitting there.
Over.
I know, I'm like typing, I'm thinking, the tears are coming down my face. I'm just, I can't talk about it. Oh,
That's
man.
tough.
It was brutal. It was brutal.
It's tough.
It was brutal. But, every... you could say 4 points. Where did you lose those 4 points on that night? Other races, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the good thing is we were right in the hunt, and Ross literally drove his ass off. At the end there, he gave it everything he could, and it was.
Yeah, well, you guys
damn Ferraris.
Yeah, I know. You guys threw everything in the kitchen sink at it, so
Yeah.
it's not a lack of effort of trying to win it. But
No, he broke the lap record just trying to get that one more position.
Amazing.
So
yeah, Ross is amazing.
He's something else.
He is something special.
He is.
He is a Renaissance man.
Well, I don't know about that.
Okay, fine. Maybe I'm overhyping his brand a bit, but why not?
Yeah, why not? No,
Why
he's
not? He deserves it.
he's super talented, and
he
it's
is.
a pleasure working with him. Actually,
Yeah,
it's amazing.
cool.
Amazing from the inside out. We see what he does every lap, every session. It just kind of showed it to the public there at those last few laps at Petit, I think.
And how? Hey, but if there is an upside about the Petit, which is a great race, a great track, great circuit, I've been there a few times. And if there's an upside, though, Paul.
Yeah.
Now, let me set the stage, folks. The race is over, season's over. But a couple of days later, I get a text message from Paul, and it's just an audio recording. I look at it, so what's this? And I push the play button on it. The dulcet, incredible sounds of a V12 engine screaming down the front. Paul, you had the first Valkyrie test for next season. Yeah, it sounded awesome.
Yeah, it did. It did. There's been a few videos and stuff leaked out afterwards, But it was the first time the Valkyries hit the ground in the US. It's gradually scaling up the testing procedures, and so we spent a couple of days, just 3 days after Petit, testing the Valkyrie GTP on Road Atlanta, which was amazing. It was
that's cool.
Sounded great.
Oh,
it's a good looking car, I'll tell you.
Yeah, it is a good looking car.
And so we're excited about what's going to happen in the future.
Now, Paul, on that program, on that test program, did Aston send over a couple Aston drivers to bet them in, or were there your drivers?
No. I mean, that's ultimately what happened at the beginning. We had Darren Turner and Harry Ticknell's a Multimatic driver, and but we had with Ross, who is an Aston Martin driver, but we consider him a Heart of Racing driver. So he was driving. Him and Roman were testing it. So they've jumped in it a couple of times before, so they were a great benchmark. They know the track. They just come hot off the track, so the ideal guys to put it through its paces on US track.
And they were happy with it.
Yeah. I mean, everything's a progress. It's everything I've been involved in before has been cars you kind of buy off a shelf and then you work with what you're given. We're part of the development process, right? Along with Aston Martin, along with Multimatic. So everything we do has a direct effect, and where the development's going. So it's a new part of our repertoire, so to speak. But it's very exciting to be part of that, and interesting to see how things evolve. Because these cars are very complicated. They're not as complicated probably as a Formula One car, but there's a lot of similarities between the complexities of what's going on. So every test, they bring in a new technology that's kind of added on to the baseline of the car. So
Did they bring in the bib height adjustment on this weekend?
No, we didn't have to worry about parc fermé, so we were bib adjusting at will. At will.
You're cranking that thing up.
No one's looking. No.
What the heck? Is Zach around? Okay, Zach's not here. Turn it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, we are going to talk about the U.S. Grand Prix and the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. Paul and I have been there many times. Paul has actually driven that circuit.
Yes, sir.
In anger, Paul.
I was very angry that day.
Yes, you were. Very angry, very frustrated.
In a Ferrari, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
In a Ferrari. Yes. Well, gosh, the parallels are obvious here. You've driven that track in a Ferrari, just like Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, I gave him the setup.
Yeah, you called Charles. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. So let's talk about this Grand Prix. Austin always does a great job. Kudos to Bobby Epstein and the entire staff at Circuit of the Americas. They do a great job. We set a record, a Formula One record, for those of you who may have forgotten. Back in 2022, 440,000 people over a 3-day weekend at that race. That is an F1 record. So, as I told the gents over in London Radio, that your quaint little sport has made an impression on America.
Yeah.
And, it was a great event. But let's talk. It's a great track. And I think one of the resounding comments that really kind of came out from the Sky Sports F1 team and others, one of the comments is like, gosh, this track just really produces great side-by-side racing and a lot of racing and passing opportunities, not just into turn 12, right?
Yeah.
And there were a lot of those comments that you would see on social media. You've driven this track in anger. A couple things I want to ask you about it. In the lead up to the sprint race on Friday, I believe it was, watching JB, Jensen Button, and he was talking about the asphalt. They were all talking about a good portion of this track been re-asphalt or reworked with new asphalt. It's a bit of a patchwork quilt sort of thing. But JB made the comment, I want to get your thoughts on it, just for those who might have been watching and didn't get their head around this, like me. JB made the comment that what they were struggling with was lateral grip on this new tarmac, but their longitudinal grip was a lot better. What does he mean by that, Paul?
Well, I mean, he's talking about, when the car's loaded up in the middle of the corner, that's obviously lateral grip, right? And then longitudinal is all about acceleration off the corner, braking into the corners. So it's probably a mixture of the track, because as you say, it is a bit of a patchwork, and where the corners have been tended to are mainly actually in the corner, not in the braking zones, etc. And also the tire. The tire makes a big difference, and all different tires behave a little differently to everything else. Pirelli, technically, the ones I've driven on, and in race cars and stuff, actually have really good longitudinal grip inherent in the design of the tire. So they usually can brake pretty deep. They can put the power down. It's when the car's got lateral effort onto it that the tire starts to slide out. So it's probably a mixture of how that tire actually is developed, but also where that patchwork is. Yeah. Right? I mean, we raced on it earlier this year with that change, and it was quite dramatic.
Was it?
How they changed and smoothed all the corners out. There was a lot of bumps that are now no longer there. So
how did the Michelins like the new tarmac? Was it okay?
Actually, when we ran it was the GT4 cars, so we were running Pirellis also.
Oh, you were running Pirellis too. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
okay. Yeah, interesting. Well, having driven this track in anger in a Ferrari, what is the toughest part of this track to get it right?
Yeah, well, I'd say there's three points. Obviously, the turn 1 and 2 are fairly simple, I would say. Getting your braking point right for one used to be difficult. They smoothed. There was a little hump there that used to have to really adjust your brake pressure to get in, but they kind of eliminated that. So setting yourself up for the S's is a big one, because honestly, from turn 3 all the way to turn 9 is one continuous left, right. So whatever you do at 3 affects 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if you want to pick up the S's, that's obviously key. The first part all the way to 6, then from 6 to 9, also really kind of barrel rolls on if you make a mistake or how the car's setting up, how it's behaving. You need the car to be able to change direction very, very well and hold the apex really tight, certainly in 8, so you can get a good launch through 9. After that, I would say you've got to go down to the long right-hander, which 17, 18, I think is the numbers. That can definitely be a detriment to tire wear and handling. You're always fighting understeer through there. You're trying to get the car to be neutral through there, because as soon as you start to pick up some understeer, you really destroy the left side front tire, which I think some people were complaining about in the track, and it really shows its ugly head through that turn, and you can lose a lot of pace just through those 2 corners alone if your tire deg is going down and the balance is going off front to rear.
I think a lot of those drivers treating that as like a long right-hander.
It is a long right-hander, but you got to really manage the throttle there, not just for pace, but also to protect the tire.
Yeah.
You can really grind that tire into the ground if you really want to take everything out of it. And oddly enough, 19, the left-hander, it looks simple, but it is technically very difficult. Visually, it's difficult. You can't see the apex when you turn in. It's got a little dip there at the apex that you need to get that left side tire down into, else you literally just skate off the track. And that carries momentum all the way down into the last turn. So I'd say those 3 sections there, very different actually. One, obviously the first S is 3 to 9, all about changing direction. The long 7 to 18 is all about long duration corner, protecting the tire, and 19 is really about getting your timing right, getting the front end to bite and get yourself down to that apex so you don't lose the car on the exit.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I was curious. I know the S's are, they get tighter and tighter as they go.
Yeah.
And if you don't get it right, I remember, for those of you that don't drive, and I'm not a professional driver either, but I've been to that class with Paul where we're doing S's like that.
Right.
And one of the things that Paul showed me is how you're driving, around the backside, and then he showed he painfully pointed out how I missed it really getting the first one, and it screwed the rest of them for me. And then by the time I got to a frame, I was way just completely out of shape.
That's right.
But then when Paul did it, obviously he did it what he likes to call the right way, and so we went through, and he was showing me that, and it really is that same. I would imagine this was condensed when you were showing me that in practice, but those S's are very much that same, and how you attack that first one can carry that momentum all the way through as they sort of get tighter and tighter, and all of a sudden you're out of shape.
The flatter, straighter you can get it into turn 3, the better off you are all the way through to 6, and then 6, as I said, kind of continuation on, but a little maybe you can reset at 6 to get yourself through the 7, 8, 9 combination.
Right. Yeah. So keep that in mind next time you're rifling down on your way to the office in your Corolla or your M Series or whatever it is you drive. Basically we've got 6. We had, going into this weekend, folks, we had 6 races left, 3 of them sprint races. So, as there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of energy around this. Can Lando take the fight to Max? There's 3 sprints, so that means 3 weekends. There's all these additional points. A lot of people expecting, will Red Bull still being, in its struggling form? Will Lando and McLaren enter this weekend still in that real dominant form like we saw in Singapore? So the thought is, this is where Lando could really start to chisel away those points this weekend. So there are 6 races left. Also, did we see a result? I'm just speculating. You let me know what you guys think. But did we see the result of the regulation that now allows teams to pull cars out of Parc Fermé between the sprint and the qualifying for the race? Because what we saw on Saturday in the sprint, quite a bit different than what we saw on Sunday. Or was it just a case of full fuel loads, 56 laps, heavy loads, different tire management and strategy, right? Because, Ferrari looked competitive all weekend. They looked competitive on Friday, did qualify well, sprint, seemed competitive. Max took the win on the sprint, and then they pull him out of Parc Fermé. I would argue in my mind that maybe Ferrari and McLaren made some adjustments. McLaren puts it on pole. Ferrari goes on to win the race. So is that just a combination of the difference between a half distance going flat out on lighter fuel loads on sprint, or was it they actually improved the car between the sprint and the race. So just a mental note I made in my notes.
Okay.
Also, I will say, Paul, a big hat tip to the University Choir for the national anthem. That was terrific.
Oh, I didn't see that or hear it.
No. Oh, it's a shame. That was really good. So kudos to the men and women in the choir. They did a great job. Also, I thought it was a great job by Franco Colapinto for snubbing Martin. Like, he was coming out and Martin was trying to get hold of him and just kind of like kept looking at him and walk right by him like he was some sort of weird fan or a mommy blogger of some sorts. And he was like, oh, well, okay. So there you go.
Don't they get this when they get their super license? Okay, these are the people.
These are the people
you'll meet.
You would think.
Who's this?
Poor guy.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
so he became a meme over the weekend. It's kind of, it was like, so you got Megan the Stallion and Franco Colapinto snubbing Martin, so he's in good company. Anyway, well, let's talk about the race and as they finished and how the teams finished. We start off at the top now. Yes, everyone knows I'm a Ferrari fan. I'm very happy with the result. And no, did I pick Ferrari as a 1-2? Heck no, in my fantasy GP, I did not pick Ferrari 1 and 2. I tried to stay with Ferrari all the first half of the year, and I'm at the bottom.
Are they even in your team? Even?
I think do I have them for? No, I think even jettison them as a team.
Oh my goodness!
I know. It's because they did so much damage to my fantasy league in the first half this season because I was all in trying to be Tifosi that I am, and then I was like, oh man, I got to make a change. So I did not have them here, and much to my shame. And I'm sorry, Charles. I'm sorry. I tried. But anyway, it ends up Charles Leclerc taking the victory, P1. Carlos Sainz in P2 both had a good start, and Charles took advantage of that inside line at turn 1 while Max and Lando were drifting out wide, trying to block each other. He nipped down the inside, took the lead, and even he basically controlled the race from that point on, Paul. Had a 10-second gap at one point over P2. So it looked good. Carlos looked to be, of the two, he was a little more hampered he was closer to Max and Lando, so he got a little more held up, I think.
Yeah,
otherwise,
sure.
I think he'd have been on the tail of Charles and right through. But anyway, a great race. Carlos did manage to undercut Max, though, Paul, and the team were really on top of the strategy with regards of when they did that undercut. I was a little concerned that it might be a little early. He's going to be in old tires by the time, the rest made that stop, and especially look at McLaren's strategy for the tire offset delta. I was a little worried about it, but he ends up coming in P2, a great race for Carlos, and he looked racy all weekend. He looked like a guy to me that was like, well, the heck with Ferrari and everybody. I'm driving for Carlos at this point.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in the sprint, right?
Yeah.
Probably hampered Ferrari finishing 1-2 in that, honestly.
Yeah.
If they'd have settled down a little bit, but yeah. Why the hell not? I guess can't fault him for trying. Yeah, it was fantastic race for Ferrari. I mean, obviously, I think ultimately the Ferrari was the fastest car on an average pace, and that obviously helped. They're taking care of their tires, which helps. That gives them options. Leclerc getting to the front, controlling the race, gave them so many options to choose from, A, B, or C, really.
Mm-hmm.
So Leclerc just did what he did, didn't have to abuse the tires to get himself that 10-second gap, and then barring a safety car of any kind deep into the race, they were looking pretty darn good. And with Carlos, if he would have just executed that pass on Max in that first lap, it would have been a whole different race for him too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it didn't happen, and I think he maybe should have tried a little harder, maybe pushed a little harder for the 3 laps.
Mm-hmm.
But it's difficult. That you're weighing up, damaging your tires, pushing too early, pushing too hard to try and make that happen. He was hoping, maybe it would come back to him a little sooner than that.
Do you think that the strategy and the mental change at that point was after the restart, then it went into pretty much tire management at that point?
Tire management, undercut. Yeah, at that point, it was too late for him.
Yeah.
But if it had got by Max on that first lap, it would have been, all elbows out between 2 Ferraris, I feel. I definitely think they had their hand on on the field really, and that's ultimately how it showed out in the end. So yeah, Carlos is I mean he doesn't have that many races left to be in a race winning car. Let him, he's gonna push. They can't control him that much at this point.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, it's not. He's moving to Williams. He's not going to see race wins anytime soon.
No.
And Charles, I think, drove an impeccable race. I really thought his weekend was great all weekend long. It was his third win of the season for Charles. And Paul, it's the first time in 18 years that Ferrari have taken a 1-2 podium at a U.S. Grand Prix.
Yeah, and I think the last U.S. Grand Prix wasn't that the bottle throwing Grand Prix?
Yeah.
Well, at Indy, it was right. That's when that shouldn't even be counted as a race, but anyway.
Yeah, right. Right. I didn't bring that sore subject up again. Everybody's like, "Yeah, that's right." I'm done.
That's why
F1.
Michelin stink. I mean, no, they're actually the best tire. But anyway,
I'm never watching F1 again. We get all those, those platitudes. Anyway, but hey, the result. Now, but they're contenders, Paul. The result puts them just 8 points behind Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship for second place in the championship.
Yeah,
so,
massive.
I mean, it's a for real battle for this Constructors' Championship. And I would say while the pace certainly was there this weekend, like you said, you think they were the fastest car. You certainly saw glimpses on a Friday. Fred Vasseur being a little more conservative going to Mexico. He thinks that altitude, low oxygen, going to be tough to keep the engines cool. Those kind of things may not flatter the Ferrari. May not be a very friendly track for the Ferrari.
Not friendly.
So we'll see.
We'll see.
But a great weekend. If you're a Ferrari fan, which I am, it was a great weekend for the team, a great win. And kudos. Let's talk about Red Bull, who ended up in P3 with Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen, sorry for people making my A long on that. Sergio Perez, P7. Max needed to protect his lead, and the sprint pole and the win was really a sign that maybe Red Bull may have found their mojo again. Maybe, they walked in with some serious upgrades. They walked in with a bib that was going up and down. No, that was the allegations. Anyway, walked in with these upgrades. Thought was, will they refine their footing? Could they get some performance gains where they had been struggling? Sprint and pole for sprint seemed to suggest that maybe they did. But in qualifying, because of the crash from George Russell, he didn't get to make his final lap. Some believe he would have put it on pole had he been able to do that. But Sunday suggested that maybe not all of their mojo was back, at least not at Coda anyway. He was struggling to stay in touch with Charles there. Charles pulled out when he had a 5, 6, 7 second lead, you could argue maybe Max would already conceded and was in tire management program at that point. Maybe the 10-second was because the race wasn't with Charles. He wasn't gunning for Charles at that point. He ran wide with Lando at turn 1, and this left them behind the Ferraris and trying to rework their strategy at this point. But Max had his hands full with Carlos early on, as you mentioned, Paul. Then that safety car seemed to calm things down a bit with Carlos. So as you suggested, maybe Carlos switched to undercut and tire management at that point. Then Ferrari was able to pull out a little bit of a lead, but then Carlos was able to undercut Max. That did work. That strategy did undercut Max. And then Max was struggling quite a bit more on his hard compound tires than he was the mediums late. So Max had to defend against Lando's, whose tires had come alive basically at that point, and came down to the final laps and pretty much a bold passing attempt. Lando had tried multiple times before, came down to turn 12. Both ran wide. Lando's penalty for doing so handed Max third, who actually increased his points lead on aggregate over the balance of the weekend. What is he, 58 points, something like that? Not what Lando wanted, but definitely what Max wanted for that weekend. So we can either talk about that move here, Paul, or we can wait until we cover McLaren and Lando if you'd like.
We can talk about it now.
Okay.
Because ultimately, it's got a lot to do with Verstappen, obviously, right? I mean, they went in turn 1. They're obviously fighting with each other. That's the detriment of being on the front row at Coda is you got to protect your line on the entry, and that ultimately was to Charles's profit on the exit, and especially those two really having they're fighting for the championship, and so that's all they're really concerned about at this point. So and then Charles just kind of walks through it. After that, Max is trying to. I think they had some tire degradation issues. I think they were talking about left sides. That might have been through the sprint, but it's obviously a weak point in high load corners. So protecting his tires, protecting his position, really keeping the back eyes on what Lando's doing. Ultimately, when they ended up coming back together on the track, once Lando ran him down on his newer hards, I think Max did an amazing job on keeping Lando back. I mean, in the DRS world, to be able to work your engine mapping, working the power from the hybrid, positioning your car in the right place, not allowing Lando to get a run for so many laps that he did was super, super impressive, I thought. I mean, that's what makes him Verstappen and what makes Perez normal.
Yeah, right.
Obviously pace-wise, we're talking about those two, and Verstappen is very much making the difference in that car. It's not the car. He's doing everything he can to and is doing everything, especially as he can, as he always has, to get a better result out of that car than it probably deserves.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I looked at some of the footage and some of the penalties given, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the rule being, if your front axle is alongside at the apex, then you need to give room on the exit. That's ultimately not where Lando was. The team, stuck to their guns and told Lando we think he was, and allowed him to keep that position. That was their mistake. It's easy. I mean, we have it all the time, even on the IMSA team, where someone's done something, the driver's barking about something, call a penalty, he did this, he did that. Sometimes I've been able to see footage before I send a message up to IMSA, because you can call what the boy-card wolf so many times till they don't listen to you anymore. So it's very important when you make an accusation to look at footage or to look at penalties, etc., that you have as much information as you can to make it correct. As I said, else you burn your bridges. So there's sometimes when, in the heat of the moment, the driver sees things one way rather than all the different angles that are available. And if you can get that footage, there's times when I've been called, we need to call a penalty on that, and I look at the footage, I'm like, that's not really a penalty. I'm not gonna burn that bridge. So, and I think it's easier for a team to get hyped up on their driver, on the emotion as well. Like, oh, we've done wrong there. Yeah, no, that's not a penalty, blah, blah, blah. They have to cool down a little bit and analyze it with a clear head. I don't think they did. The Lando, and I said, I saw some other kind of similar passes during the race on TV, and most of the time, all those drivers in Lando's position just backed off and accepted the point that, yes, I passed outside the white line. What Max did doesn't really matter. If Max drove off with track limits, then he's got a certain amount of track limits. If he drove him off the road, then you can fight that, but you cannot fight the fact that you passed while you're off the track, which you cannot do. And that's the rules, right? Whether he gave you room. If he didn't give you room, then you fight that. You say, hey, he pushed us off the track. But the one thing you can't do is nullify that penalty, even if you get it, by driving off and passing and continuing on. Shouldn't have happened. It wasn't there. And Lando should have known that. He was questioning it. He was waiting for clarification. The team made the mistake on standing by, and which they shouldn't have done. They could have given Lando another chance, I think, for a go at Verstappen.
Yeah, the team pretty vocal about Andrea Stella, saying that they interfered with really good racing, and Toto Wolff saying it was a biased decision. Certainly, Toto's not about to make life easy for Red Bull.
Yeah.
But when you look at that poll, I've seen a lot of arguments back and forth on both sides, of course, and the argument was, well, he should have, or one of the arguments was he didn't cede the position, but he also wasn't able to pull out a 5-second lead to cover his penalty.
Right.
That argument was being used to suggest that's why he shouldn't have ceded the position, because he wouldn't have had the pace to get back around him. Others say, well, he clearly had the pace on Max. He would have gotten around him if he'd ceded that position and then quickly attacked him again. Right? Yeah. That's all, conjecture. It's hard to know what would have happened either way.
Yeah, I mean, it was close that he could have pulled out that 5-second gap. And that's something they need to think about, rather than, should you just pass off track sooner, like 2 laps sooner, and pull out your 5-second, accept the penalty, and go for it? I mean, ultimately, McLaren should have said, we think it's okay, but push as hard as you can because we need 5 seconds just in case we get a penalty.
Right. I think Christian Horner made a comment that there was a brief moment, that he did seem to slow up, like they were hesitating about possibly giving the place back when they should have been just, pushing. Hammer down, push, hard, pull out 5 seconds at least. If you got a 10-second penalty, well, so be it. But if it was a 5-second, which is what they were handing out, then he'd have been safe. So Christian sort of intimated that maybe they were trying to internally decide maybe whether to give it back, and they didn't pull out a 5-second lead. Yeah. That's Christian's version.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe, easily could have been. I mean, those. It's not like there's computers back there just making the best decision. There's emotions. There's people making decisions, and they can't make those decisions ultimately. In the instant, sometimes it takes a little bit of thought and trying to get yourself back together in the heat of the moment. It's. I mean, the rule, as I said, the rule is if your axle is ahead at the apex, then they have to give you room. And everyone that didn't have that, including Norris, apart from Norris, actually was the only one that kind of went through. Everyone else kind of ceded that position. You got to think of the lines as, if there's a brick wall out there, would you attempt that pass and ride through it? No, you wouldn't, right?
You wouldn't.
And I get that Max was also, off the road also to do it. And that's where people will argue, well, I was pushed off the road. Well, fair enough, but you're also given, I don't think they were tight enough on the cars to really warrant that. But Norris can't risk the car either, and Max can. And that's why Norris has to give a bit more leeway when making those moves, because if they touch and they go out, then Max is the winner again, right?
There was a lot of those arguments when Lewis was fighting Max, and he should have gave him a car length, and a lot of the Lewis fans, well, no, if he didn't want to be in the gravel, then he should have lifted.
Right. And that's another thing. It's like we're talking about all this runoff at this track, and what we saw at the Red Bull Ring, where they have that line of gravel. I think they need to do the same thing here. I think that certainly at turn 12, maybe even at 1, and it really wouldn't affect the track because you have to go so far off to get into the gravel. But I think that system seemed to work really well at Red Bull Ring. I think it needs to be instigated here as well, where you just don't have that option. You've got to tuck the car back in, else you end up in the gravel out there. So
it might work. It's certainly heated arguments on both sides.
And I can see why people will get angry because they thought Max was running them off. But ultimately, the rule is the rule that the stewards kind of stuck to the rule consistently through the race. Whether they stick to that rule consistently through the season is a whole nother matter.
That's a whole different thing.
Right, but through this race, they were actually read it consistently, except for your pal Yuki, which I will talk about later.
And I think if you're at home and you're upset because in another race this happened and they didn't call it, or earlier this, you got a legit thing. But this is why we've been saying since 2005, I've been saying that the FIA need a standardized stewarding crew for every race.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people that are newer to the sport now asking, well, why aren't they just the same crew? And just so you know, just to help you out here, I'm not trying to be arrogant, but to help you out here is that those stewarding roles are given. This is part of the FIA, and then when they go to different countries, they have these guest stewards come in. They're part of the motoring clubs in those countries. This is one of the perks, and so this is how it's political. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
All right. FIA, if you ask them, say, well, we can't afford to have a dedicated steward.
How can think of the money?
Yes, they can.
I mean, most of those stewards they do it voluntarily. At least they used to.
Yeah.
I'm sure they get wined and dined by
yes,
by the commissioner.
Yep, and it pays back for their vote for the presidency. So
there you go.
It's very political as to why that doesn't happen. So if you're sitting at home, and even if you're newer to the sport and you're a big content generator and a F1 influencer, well, there's your answer. We've been saying it since 2005. Let's talk about Sergio Perez.
That's good enough, damn it. You like my face? You like it?
I said it last year. I said it before. I said they should have put Liam in this seat. And if they wanted to move Sergio over to RB, they could, although I think Sergio's contract would have something that would prevent that. But anyway, Sergio, my man, Sergio just almost seemed content, Paul, to run behind Magnussen and the other midfield cars for the majority of the early part of the race.
Yeah.
He just, I'm not saying he was content, but it looked like that. It just, I mean, he tried to recover late in the race once he got the hard compounds on, but in the fresh tires, he was able to get up to P7, but it's just, I don't know what it is. He just is
just not good enough, damn it.
There. Yeah, it's just not good enough.
Yeah, I can't, we can talk about it every week. It hasn't changed.
Yeah. Well, and if they lose second in the Constructors' Championship, this is on them.
Yeah, it is.
It's on them.
Yeah.
Should have put somebody in there that could have protected P2
right
in the Constructors' Championship.
Yep.
So very difficult. I love Sergio, but
I know that's the thing, right? I mean, Sergio's a great guy. He's a passionate guy, and he's showed in the past just ultimate speed. But right now he's not there. He's in the Ricciardo frame of pace, and everyone has their day, and it's not his day anymore. It really isn't. Kind
of in that Daniel Ricciardo, Valtteri Bottas, just
yeah.
This is
it's hard to do it, Yeah, I mean, it's hard to do. I mean, think of how many races you have to do in Formula One nowadays. I mean, what they say? Albon has now done more Grand Prix than Jackie Stewart.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the intensity of what Formula One is, it's very difficult to do it race after race, let alone year after year. Right?
Yeah, it really is. Let's see. Who should we talk about? Now let's talk about McLaren.
Oh, Jesus.
And Lando Norris. You got Lando in P4, Oscar Piastri P5. Lando ran wide at turn 1 with Max, got hobbled, losing 3 places there. From there, both Lando and Oscar seemed to lose pace with Max and Charles in the early stages, but the team did. Got to give kudos to the team here. The team did pull a very nice strategy, running both cars long into those first stints. The team strategy really created this offset delta, which allowed them to come back late in the race on fresher tires and get up on Max's tail. Max was struggling on his hard compounds. What are they, 6 or so laps older than Lando's?
Yeah.
So kudos to McLaren, man. They pulled that race back into the grip. They really did. After some patience, Lando then was able to catch Max. He tried multiple passes, struggled to get around, and then finally, as you mentioned, Max defending incredibly well there. But he finally tried that move at turn 12. Both ran wide. Lando was penalized because he had multiple off track or beyond the white line incursions. And so if you consider Tsunoda, Gasly, Russell, they were all penalized for the same kind of incident at that corner with 5-second penalties. It became clear the stewards were clamping down on that in this particular race. May not on that first lap, but you also know that first lap is sort of first lap incidents, right? They're a little more lenient on that first lap. But then they started clamping down, which left George Russell saying, "What?" Right? So from that perspective, that's what happened. Regardless, the team said it was a shame. They interfered with the outcome of this race. They were very, very vocal. I'd almost say got to be a little careful. If this was Max Mosley era, Maxley would have he would have slammed their head in the car door about criticizing the FIA like that.
Yeah.
You got to be careful. And I would imagine it's the same for IMSA. If you're not happy with it, if you get out there, start bad-mouthing and start talking crap about IMSA, you're going to get a call.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I said, I get people's, displeasure with the situation. I just don't think no one was manipulating anything. It was consistent through the whole race. They didn't pick on McLaren at all. They if they had given a different decision, then they would have been given a lot of leniency to McLaren. So they couldn't seem to do that. So it's unfortunately the incident happened. Not great for McLaren to start from pole and finish fourth for sure. Not what they were looking for either. And obviously the first turn had a lot to do with that. So they're probably walking away disappointed. And they should be. But I'm not sure they could have beaten the Ferraris today anyway, but they certainly should have beaten the Red Bull.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there you go, Zach. All those beers and hanging out at the pub with Derek Warwick. May want to rethink that one, buddy. Derek.
He only remembers everything you said before the third one comes. Yeah.
Right. Oscar, average day for Oscar, but then again, late on, it was kind of interesting. The team, he started slowing down to give that 5-second gap.
Right.
So Lando would figure.
Yeah, I thought he might get into that fight. Maybe he was just a little too far. I thought ultimately he could kind of be a spoiler in there. If Lando had got by and he was close enough, he could have pushed Max back a little bit. But I think they made that decision not to push him harder, but it was probably a 50-50 deal whether he would have made it or not. But
good point.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton, DNF, George Russell, P6. This is a tough weekend for Mercedes. Really for Lewis, he didn't get out of Q1. That's very un-Lewis, first of all.
Yeah.
Clearly saying they were really struggling with his car. Not sure of all of the issues. Then during the race, he spun in the gravel. Toto very quickly come out. Oh, that's a car issue. That's not a Lewis issue, as you would expect him to do. Toto pointed that out, so he was out lap 3. Definitely not what you would expect from Lewis Hamilton. Bad weekend all the way around. But George, coming into that Friday, I thought he looked kind of competitive. Free practice.
Yeah.
Came into qualify. I kind of thought maybe he'd be in the hunt, Lewis getting knocked out in Q1. I thought, George's going to be thereabouts, I think, maybe for this weekend. Then he had that crash, same corner Lewis crashed during the race, tore the car up. And that was, the team did a yeoman's job putting that car back together. Unfortunately, didn't have enough of the upgraded parts to rebuild his car as an upgraded Mercedes. So they pulled it out of park for May. He started from pit lane. I got to tell you, though, George marches from pit lane to P6, Paul. An incredible performance. It
was an incredible performance. It obviously goes under the radar because he had to fight all the way at the back, and we didn't see him for a long time. Unfortunately, he got that penalty for passing Bottas, was it? It's like, oof.
Yeah, I know. They told him about the penalty, and he was like, what?
For Bottas? It's like, come on. He was going to fall over like a wet fish eventually, pretty quick there. So that was a tough one to swallow, I'm sure. But ultimately, I think the Mercedes they might have been the second best car out there.
I know.
But the incidents, with the crashes, Lewis spinning off, etc., just put them back where they shouldn't have been. But obviously Russell showed, even in an unupgraded car, that the car was actually pretty darn quick. Yeah. So I think it was definitely a race where they didn't make the most of a potentially competitive car, really. And whatever happened to Lewis in qualifying, but Russell was showing great pace in qualifying. The qualifying kind of had a bit of an issue, obviously, with it being called too early. But I think, and him starting from the back, so weren't able to show how good they would have been up front. But I got a feeling they were nearly, they were the measure of certainly the Red Bull and possibly in McLaren, maybe equal to McLaren on pace during the race.
Yeah, if he'd have started at P6 where he would have, I think he'd have been absolutely in the mix.
Yeah.
And now it makes you wonder, because Lewis said after the shunt in qualifying, they said, well, I'd be happy to give him, my upgrade parts or whatever. And George's like, oh, that's very kind of you, but no thanks. We won't be doing that. I won't be taking the upgrades because clearly without the upgrades, George was fast. He went all the way to P6. So maybe Lewis was like, yeah, no, I'll go with the old version,
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway. Yeah, it's a shame. And, after the race, I'm sure he just got a mild pat on the back for it. I think he drove incredibly well.
Well, Toto's still apologizing to Lewis.
And Toto's still over here, engaged in apologetics for Lewis and blaming the car. Yeah, it's a shame because George was an absolute stonking race for him. Great job. Another great race. Let's talk about Haas.
Oh, no,
You've got Nico Hülkenberg in P8, Kevin Magnussen in P11. If I'm honest, really watching out of Friday, I thought Haas was on par for dual points finish this weekend. I really did. They look competitive at their home Grand Prix. Nico scoring a P8. I thought Kevin was on song for a P10, but there was an odd thing, and I read the press release after the race, and maybe I haven't read a news article today about it. There's just this odd thing where they said, no, Kevin, you got to box now. They're like, your car's going to blow up box now. I didn't know what was going on.
It sounded like it. Unless the only thing I can imagine was the comms weren't getting through, and he wasn't confirming the pit in. Maybe.
Okay. Maybe.
That's where my mind went, but it could have been a flat tire.
You may be right, because the team said there was a communication issue, and apparently I think there was a communication where maybe Kevin thought he was on a one-stopper, and the team was like, no, we were always going to be on a two-stopper. So I think maybe what happened. So he came in late. Just put him out of the points in P11. It's unfortunate because I think Haas was on.
Yeah, it's great to see him up there consistently. Isn't it?
It was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a really good race for them.
Yeah.
An even better race, I would argue, for RB. Liam Lawson, P9, Yuki Tsunoda, P14. Yuki qualified well, started in the top 10 anyway, was running a good race, but then boxed early. May have been a little bit of a strategy error here, I'm just suggesting. But they boxed him early to cover Magnussen and Gasly, and that didn't work out. It came back in traffic, got a little hobbled back there, but then he himself garnered a 5-second penalty for running Albon wide.
Yeah.
And then he was all bent out of shape and mad at the team that Lawson came out in front of him and beat him.
Yes.
But how'd that happen? Somebody give me an explanation of how that happened.
Right now.
Yeah. Right now. It was like, well, Liam was faster than you for the whole race. That's how that happened.
Yeah. He also had a lot of traffic, but he fought it on hard tires and fought his way to the front. Yeah.
And he didn't, unlike you, Yuki, he picked up an arch nemesis in the form of Fernando Alonso this weekend.
No kidding.
So he had a lot of adversity.
Yeah. No,
if you're going to get one driver really ticked off at you, probably Fernando is not the guy you want.
Not really. He'll get you.
He will.
He'll be waiting outside your hotel. He'll be walking outside your house with the railings with the cup.
I'll guarantee you that conversation after qualifying went like this.
But if you don't, I will look for you. I will find you. And I will kill you.
That's exactly what Fernando was saying.
Yeah.
So, that's not who you want to pick. But Paul, a fantastic run for him. I would argue, much like Lando and Alex Albon, I think Yuki has a tough teammate now, and that's going to be interesting to watch. Liam did a great job starting at the back of the grid, making his way into the points in P9, well-executed race, delivered the goods, made some great passes. It's, that's very good if you consider he hasn't raced in F1 for a year, right? Yeah. And it does send a message that they made the right decision with Daniel. If it was me, I would have moved Liam into Red Bull in Sergio's seat and moved Sergio over to RB, but that's just me. If you wanted to say,
may still happen, you never know.
You never know.
Yeah.
I said last year that neither Dan or Yuki, either one of them shouldn't be there. They should have started the season with Liam. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I see that, and Helmut Marko didn't, but anyway, Tommy won right. Great race for him, though.
Yeah, no, it really was. I mean, started off the weekend pretty tough, getting the penalties and all that kind of stuff, but not through his doing at all.
He had 60 grid place penalty.
Yeah.
As Grace said, he was starting from Zandvoort.
Yeah. But it's exactly what he went into the weekend saying. I'm here. That I need to score points for the team, and that's he's auditioning, and he put on a hell of an audition, right?
He sent a message. I'm ready for the Red Bulls.
Yeah, it's not where he starts, where he finishes. He seems to be able to finish in the points, and that's very, very, very important.
It is. It's just one race, but great.
It is one race, but to come in back in, that's what he did when he debuted before. It's not a coincidence.
It's not.
The boy can get it done. And very, very, very impressive. So he's obviously got a right to be in one of the Red Bull cars next year, whatever it is. I can't imagine. I would rate him number 2 on the team, and Yuki, and then Sergio at the bottom at the moment. So you got to expect him has a really good shot again the Red Bull, as long as the consistency stays there for the rest of the year, and I've got no reason to question that, really.
Yeah.
As I said,
I've got nothing. Have some bobbles, but but
I've got nothing against Yuki. I just think he's average. Yeah. He just came in with a presence and a personality and whatever that made an impact, but I don't think his driving has ever made an impact, honestly. No. But he's swearing maybe, but I just don't. On the track, I just haven't seen anything special at all. No. I do think he was the only guy that got a penalty that probably shouldn't have. Yeah. Because according to their rules, I looked at the pass he made. His front axle was way ahead of, I can't remember who was passing at the apex in the 12. He got a penalty for it. I'm not really sure why. So I don't think he deserved that penalty, but he did deserve to be behind Lawson.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of another great drive, I thought this was going to be a good weekend for Williams. I was right in one sense. You had Alex Albon down to P16, Franco Colapinto in P10. Great drive by Franco. It's an interesting one, but you got to give Alex a little credit here with some deference. He did have some clashes early on. He had that clash with Ocon in T1. Was forced off the track by Gasly and Tsunoda, so that was Alex who Tsunoda went up against. So it's hard, it's hard to be too down on Alex on this race.
Yeah.
I will say though, on the other hand, the new F1 phenom Franco had a great race into the points, and he's becoming hot property in a series that doesn't have a seat for him next year.
Yeah.
Right? With Carlos, but let me ask you this, Paul. With Carlos Sainz coming on board, they're all in with Carlos, right? I'd say that Alex, he may be in the hot seat next year if Franco continues to deliver like this, and if they're all in on Alex and Carlos and Alex isn't getting it done.
Yeah.
I'd say Alex may be in the hot seat again.
Yeah, maybe. I just don't see Colapinto not getting a ride next year. I know you're saying that.
No, I'm with you on that.
There's the Audi ride that no one would want right now. And honestly, I would look at Red Bull. I think Red Bull need to. I think they have an open slot. I think they should have an open slot, and they
should have 2 open slots.
Yeah, they need to take advantage of Colapinto's availability. Honestly,
I agree.
I know it's not part of their feeder system. I know they have people in their feeder system, but they don't have a place to keep experimenting with these people. They've kind of lost a little bit in bringing the new phenoms out. I think this guy's solid. He races so well against everybody. On the track, he held off. Who did he hold off? Quite a long time. Who had fresher tires? I can't remember what the deal was, but
it was Perez.
Was it? Yeah. Again, right? His nemesis, right? It's like, you're racing this guy for a seat. If I was Red Bull, I would be at his front door when he wakes up in the morning. Yeah. Because I think he can make a difference and raise the level of the driver lineups in the 2 Red Bull teams.
I agree. I'd move Liam to Red Bull with Max, and I'd move Colapinto maybe in on loan. That would benefit Williams.
Yep.
Move him over on loan, and then bring up one of your junior guys.
Right.
That's exactly what
I don't think they're going to get Yuki, but I would definitely move Colapinto into that position. I don't know how much Williams have stake in Colapinto if they can on loan, as you say.
Yeah.
I don't know because, I mean, they do have 2 good drivers for next year, and I don't see them really looking out unless, as you say, Albon falls off. And I think Albon's still at that level. He just had a bad weekend.
Yeah, I agree. He's had a bad few races. But, I was wrong on Alpine because they got doing. For some reason, I forgot about Jack. So they got doing. So, yes, I agree. Let's talk about Alpine. Paul, you had Pierre Gasly in P18. No, did I get these backwards?
I don't know.
Gasly in 12, Ocon in 18, I think is what that was. Sad because I thought Pierre, he started 6th.
Yeah.
And the team felt like they may or could be a P7 contender.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt like, Pierre looked pretty competitive this weekend. Car looked better this weekend. I was feeling some positive energy about what Pierre might be able to achieve there starting 6th. I thought, gosh, hopefully he can hang on in top 10 for sure.
Yeah.
But then when Magnussen went for that undercut, the team tried to cover it. And they put Pierre out in serious traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant that he was going to be outside looking in on the points. Yeah. And his hard compounds really didn't like the car at all. He got that penalty for forcing Alex wide, and that pretty much put pay to come a cropper at that point for the race. It's unfortunate for Pierre.
It was.
I really felt like he looked better.
Yeah, I think the car was a top 10 competitive car for sure. And they worked their way to the back of the field, unfortunately. So, circumstances did not work for Gasly. I think the car was competitive, and he was competitive in it. But, sometimes it happens.
It happens.
Mm-hmm.
Esteban, bad weekend. Got spun around by Alex in turn 1, put him at the back. He was not able to get back up. He did box late and stole the fast lap away from Williams.
Yes, he did. Which another impressive thing by Colapinto.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Jesus.
I know Colapinto had. It's not like he boxed late and nabbed it.
No.
He had worn tires and had it on merit.
I know.
And then Williams or Alpine stole it because that's who they're battling in the championship.
Right.
It's a good move by Alpine to do that.
And that's going away next year, right?
That's why it's going away.
Well, I don't know. Why?
It's like, why not?
Why not?
It's fun.
Yeah.
Why not? Let them mess around with it. I think it's fun.
Absolutely. I don't see any reason not to keep that going. I was never a big fan of it, but I like it more in that realm than just a fast lap out there where people are stealing points from people rather than gaining points. So.
I like it because it was a heads-up move because they're fighting Williams in the championship, and Williams went for it, got the fast lap with Franco, and Alpine's like, I'm going to take it from you. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's part of the strategy. Anyway, tough weekend for Aston Martin. Lance Stroll P15, Alonso P13. Fernando knew he was out of place when Martin asked him before the race. Said, really, I'm going to be looking in my mirrors for most of the race, and he was. Very difficult. Still managed to be P13. Car just did not look hooked up here. Stroll, very ragged all weekend, ran wide after the safety car, lost several positions. He was riding right there with Fernando, but dropped back. Very difficult. Fernando did achieve one thing, though. He found a new arch nemesis in Liam Lawson this weekend, so he's got that going for him. So tough weekend. Let's hope they do better in Mexico, though.
Yeah, not great.
Not a lot to report there, Paul.
Not really, yeah.
And even less to report with Sauber, with Bottas down in P17. Joe Guan Yu had that spin, and Valtteri got pushed wide by Russell, left him at the back. They seem destined, Paul, at this point, not to score.
It is brutal to watch.
Brutal. All right, let's give out some awards. The first award is always Move of the Race.
We'll do it live.
Oh, yeah. Move of the race, Paul. Who'd you have?
Well, I got a couple here, so we can share a little bit. I certainly thought the call to start on the hards and go to medium was a good call, and it benefited a lot of people. But ultimately, I think I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc in turn 1 because that really changed the whole race around and kind of set the stage for the whole success.
Right. Yeah. I had Leclerc. Yeah, it's a good move.
Yeah,
I agree. All right, let's give out donkey of the race. Oh boy, who'd you have, Paul?
Well, can we rename it the Sergio Perez Donkey Award?
Yeah, right.
Is that bad form? That's
right.
That's mean.
That's bad.
That is bad. That's
the
mean.
problem is just as well as I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So you gave it to Sergio?
No, I gave it to Lewis.
I gave it to Lewis too.
But Sergio's kind of.
Get it there, Lewis.
Sorry.
Yeah. It was a bad deal. Obviously, Lewis lost the rear end on the entry in 19. One of those difficult turns I talked about right at the beginning. It is tough to get the car working well there. It can be 2 points. Is exactly what happens to the Mercedes for both of them in that corner. But so Lewis wins it for being the only DNF of the weekend in a car that was probably the second best car on the track.
Sorry, Lewis. That's who I had too. And then finally, drive the race.
Get it there, Lewis.
Get down.
Yes. Drive of the race, Paul. Who'd you have?
I'm going to give it to George.
Awesome.
I thought it was a heck of a drive. It didn't show a lot of there weren't a lot of highlights on his race, but from where he began to where he finished, that's a lot of cars he fought through. There wasn't a lot of attrition. He literally had to fight it every lap to get that car there. So very impressive.
Absolutely. Very impressive from pit lane to P6.
Mm-hmm.
A terrific. George, your team may not love you, but we do. Right? I think you're doing great, George. Hang in there. A lot of people gave it to, I think, even driver of the day was Colapinto for good reason, finishing in the points P10. Great race for Franco. I think he did good. I voted for Liam, who did better than Franco Colapinto, scoring in P9 and starting at the back of the grid.
Yeah.
So as much as I think Franco deserving, I think Liam did better.
He did. Awesome.
So great job. That's who I gave it to anyway. So, Paul, we don't have any time to sit around and, rag chew and chew the fat and,
go on vacation.
We don't have time to bicker and argue, boo-kiloo. We don't have time to do that because we're going to go to Mexico this weekend. High altitude. Is right.
Yeah.
It's going to be all Sergio all weekend, so get ready for that. They've got a local hero, and as much as we're upset with what's going on with Sergio, we do love Sergio. He's awesome.
Yeah.
Great guy. But we'll be back. But let us know what you think about this race. You can do that at theparkferme.com. Just share your opinion with decorum, civility. As always, that means no personal attacks. And yes, I know our YouTube channel, someone said Grace and I say right all the time. You're right. We do say right. So there you go. It's one of those, it's one of those things. It's like verbal pauses. I know. It's hard to get rid of,
It is really hard.
So it is. So apologies, but will you love us in the morning? Come on, man. We mean well. So there you go. We've got that going for us. Also, if you like the podcast, you can always share it with a friend. You could always go on social media and say, hey, I listened to this podcast because they mean well.
Yeah, maybe go down the street, and hand them a little, here's a podcast for you.
Yeah, go to a political rally. Don't hold up, vote this or that. Listen to Park for Me. Put our logo on there. Why not? I mean, what's it going to hurt? You don't have to be ashamed because you listen to this podcast. It's okay.
Head high.
Head high. Let's do some mailbag before we bail out because these are good.
You've got mail.
All right. This is from Ryan McLeod. This is a good question.
All right, Ryan.
Paul, with regards to the start of the U.S. Grand Prix, why would Lando and Max cut over to the apex instead of trying to hog the racing line? In your opinion, would they have been better off to do what they did, or try to stick to the racing line to get more speed into turn 2, or perhaps hold off Leclerc?
Yeah, I mean that's the nature of this beast, and as I said before, it's why the pole sitter rarely leads the first lap out of here. The nature of the corner is such a wide entry. You've got to protect yourself. Else, if you stay out wide for a good exit, about 10 cars are going to steam in there. You just have to get your car in the way. You don't have to have your car at the ultimate pace or the right angle. But if you can get your car in the way, there's no way for whoever's on the outside to turn in. So you just hang them out to dry. So those guys obviously very much focused on each other, dive into the apex to make sure one couldn't get one over the other. And Leclerc was luckily, because he came back in fourth, he ultimately had a big vision point and was able to take the great line without opening himself up for other people to dive inside at that point in the track. And he ultimately got the perfect line and got to dive inside. But there's not a lot you can do as a leader going into that corner but try and protect yourself to the inside.
Well, that's from a professional driver's perspective. I give you my opinion, but you know what my opinion would mean? Nothing. So it's a good answer. Brian from Austin, of all places, keep Austin F1, Brian.
There you go.
Brian asked, I was wondering, do you think Williams might have some buyer's remorse with Carlos after the performance from Franco, especially with him being so much younger and cheaper? Also, second question, do people take a number to stand around Toto at each race so they can share in the same TV time with him? Love you guys, Brian from Austin. Thanks, Brian. That's a great question.
It is. It's
always weird.
They should auction off that position on the team, donate it to charity.
I know.
Okay, you get 10 minutes behind Toto. Hopefully something happens and the camera pans to him, which it often does, right?
Yeah, it does.
You just go like,
it's like Toto holds court.
Yeah.
And then Mick gets a little time, Esteban gets a little time, and then they
I saw Esteban again.
Yeah, you saw Esteban.
Yeah, I saw him. Yeah.
This one time, Paul and I were in Austin for the U.S. Grand Prix, and they had the drivers standing out.
This is when there wasn't like 5,000 million people at Austin.
This is before Austin. This is before Formula One was Drive to Survive. Before it was Gunther in America.
Yeah.
So you could walk the pit lane.
Shut that guy up.
Oh. Yeah. And so they had the drivers standing out in front of the garages when they had the fans go through, and you could go up and talk to him. And nobody was talking to Esteban. And he was standing there by himself. There was no team, no nothing. He was just standing out in his race overalls watching fans, and all the fans are going by like, I don't know who that is. And they kept walking. So we walked out to talk to him, and he was just standing there. It was almost like he was a cardboard cutout. He wasn't even moving. He was just standing there.
It was like we were at the zoo, and he was like the the llama in the cameras. Like, no one's looking at the llama. Everyone's looking at the lions.
I know. It'd have been great if he was a llama because they'd spit on us. But he didn't even do that, and we just kind of walked back. And then I felt bad. I don't know that we should talk.
Should we ask for his autograph? I don't even want it.
What should we do?
Invite him out for dinner.
I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm going to just go on for it. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was funny.
Right. But you just brought up Gunther, so maybe I should change my donkey. That guy, don't give him a microphone. Do not. Let him go, people. There's a reason he got fired. Let him go.
Let him go.
He doesn't have anything to bring to the party.
He was fun in Drive Survive, but that doesn't translate to him being a great broadcaster. So
he is horrible.
Yeah.
His questions are horrible. His lead-in to the questions. He basically asks a question while trying to answer it to show that he has knowledge of Formula One. And then he's asking the questions to the guy, and he's like, I guess what you just said. I don't know.
Congratulations,
he's terrible.
Gunther. You have just achieved Davide status in Paul's world, So you've got Davide status. He was so brilliant. So anyway, there you go. So anyway, do you think you're having...
Where's that Lando thing? Yeah.
Oh, no. Well, I'll give you the Flavio.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
There you go. Perfect.
So, buyer's remorse with Carlos?
I don't think so, but you could think there
so,
would be a hint of it. I think they're just remorse. They don't have 3 cars to run. I mean, they know they're going to get a great driver in Carlos. He's doing great. How the money situation, maybe they could say, but I don't think so. But that they definitely want to keep a grip on him because
Carlos brings a lot of insider info too, Paul.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
he knows where the bodies are buried.
Yeah, he's going to do a great job for them.
Yeah, he will.
But probably remorse in not bringing him into the team at the beginning of the season.
Yeah. Right.
But,
Good point. All right. Well, that does us what we think. And then we will be back next week to do it all over again because we're going to talk about the Mexican Grand Prix, and that's always a fun time. So we will be back. Until that time, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Gamer, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.